So, Mr. Harsh, firstly, I want to acknowledge three friends, Ishika, Tanisha, and Tarini, who inspired me to discuss this topic. And they said, how come you've not focused on something which is such an important global movement? I have to say that not only have I focused on it, but I believe in such a movement, not only about Black lives, but lives that matter. Because I believe that the essence of an enlightened humanity is the end of prejudice in human interaction. Because prejudice, I think, in human interactions come from the basest part of the human brain. And if you look at the, lives of Queen Victoria and Prince Albert, one of the game changers was the grand exhibition, the great exhibition that happened. And that was, an exhibition that was a melting pot for different countries, different cultures. The Americans came in, the Europeans came in, and they put aside their prejudices and their problems and their wars. So the point I'm making, Mr. Harsh, is for great innovation, for great invention, for technology, for science to proliferate, we need to put aside prejudices. And the epitome of prejudice, I find, is what has plagued America since it was founded, which is that there has been a great prejudice against the blacks. So they have issues in terms of progress, education, development, and one of the cornerstones of the Black movement, Black Lives Matter, is to unfund the police and use those funds to try and encourage innovation, education, development, and helping the blacks come to power with the whites in America. So I think, the base part of the brain, it categorizes others as predator or prey. In the same way that you categorize fair from dark, you categorize good versus bad, you categorize intelligence versus unintelligent. So these are our own perceptions. They may not be necessarily true. And the reason it's relevant to our own country is also because there are so many prejudices in this country based on religion, based on classes, based on caste. After all, the same way that America has battled, prejudice against the blacks or the Hispanics. I've studied in a Hispanic majority. There are lots of Hispanics in California. That's where I've studied. So I've actually viewed this. So in the same way that America has these prejudices, India has prejudices against various religions. Instead of being a melting pot of different cultures, after all, we must not forget that the Mughals brought so much art, so much Pietrodura inlay. The Taj Mahal, which is one of the wonders of the world, we attribute to the Mughals and the Muslim community. So from time immemorial, India has been host to the caste system, and the caste system has, I think, limited progress and growth. At one time, it did have relevance, Mr. Harsh, because we did, the caste system was formed because of a division of, your chosen field in life. But it soon became about prejudice and about differences in marriage and very many impediments in growth. So if you were to ask me, all forms of prejudice, the same prejudice that makes a white man, a white police officer, naturally assume that a black man wearing a hoodie is a criminal. In the same way, any prejudice, is only detrimental to the growth of a human being. The same prejudice that makes a lot of people feel that, hey, women are not as good at science and technology, and women cannot be, part of NASA, or women cannot go to the moon, or women cannot be pilots. That's the same prejudice. I mean, it's just a different form that it takes in the Black Lives Matter, the topic that plagues the nation, the American nation at the moment. And I can't help but say, without really wanting to sound critical of any form of government, I must say that in my personal opinion, Mr. Trump has not, encouraged equality. He hasn't come out and stood up for the movement as much as I would have wanted him to. President Obama had set in place certain reforms, and those were dismantled by President Trump to our absolute, at least to my utter disappointment. Because for America to be, which is one of the great nations of the world, to lead, it has to give up the prejudice of the blacks. It has to encourage black education. Progress of the human race is when we give up prejudices. And human development and individual development is only impeded when we, are going to bring color and class. If you read Pride and Prejudice, what was Darcy's prejudice? It was about the class of, Elizabeth. And when he overcame that prejudice, you notice that there bloomed such a beautiful love. So that could be the metaphor of my answer to you. That when you give up prejudice, what started out as resentment and attitude and, things that impeded a relationship, actually turned out to be one of the most beautiful relationships to this day. When you think of love, you think of Darcy and Elizabeth. So to see individual development, you cannot impede it with prejudice, because you are actually impeding development of a community, of a society, of a human being, and of the entire human race. So this is what I feel about the Black Lives Matter movement, and I'm very much pro it. It was started in 2013, if I'm not wrong, and there were a lot of people due to whom this happened. But in 2019, 1,000 people died for it to gain such momentum and become one of the most important movements in humanity. It's just created a lot of sadness and a lot of unhappiness in a lot of people, and I'm one of them. Killing black. I must quote a statistic, and this is by the PLOS ONE magazine, the study by PLOS ONE, and I'm not mispronouncing PLOS ONE, it is PLOS ONE, found that a significant bias exists in killing unarmed Black Americans versus unarmed white Americans. So that is a statistic. And if we allow prejudice to proliferate, we will limit individuals in society, we will limit aspiration, achievement, and all progress of humanity. That is my personal feeling. As you know, as I've already mentioned, in 2019, more than 1,000 Black Americans died, the largest number, and this actually created the hashtag Black Lives Matter. Some of the people that spewed a lot of anguish and resentment among the Black people were Trayvon Martin, Eric Garner, Michael Brown, Breonna Taylor, and of course we can't forget the main impetus, which was George Floyd, whose last words were "I can't breathe." And that was, of course, because of the chokehold. One of the things that the Black Lives Matter movement is asking for is to give up the chokehold by the white American cop. To ban that act because that was what eventually killed George Floyd. So yes, I feel very passionately about this movement, and I think it's gained momentum all over the world, Harsh. It's not only with the Black people like us, people like a lot of white Americans who have the spirit of humankind alive in their souls, are very pro this hashtag, very pro this movement. And to conclude my little, journey going through this with you, I must say that thank you for giving me the opportunity to, discuss this matter, which I'm very impassioned about.